Have you ever wondered what really goes on behind the scenes of government? How decisions are made that shape your community and your future? Welcome to Govern, the podcast where we take you inside the world of public service, leadership, and the innovation driving local change. Join us as we explore the roles of elected officials, how government operates, and what it takes to create real change. We'll dive into forward-thinking leadership lessons, and how we all can influence the decisions that shape our communities and futures. Thank you for tuning in to Govern with Supervisor Curt Hagman.
Welcome back to another episode of Govern. My name is Curt Hagman. I'm the 4th District County Supervisor for San Bernardino County, and we're ongoing series about opening the insides of government so people understand what we do. I'm very excited today to talk about budget because it really kind of drives everything. And today we have our expert, Matthew Erickson, who's in charge and knows where all the money is coming from and how to spend it.
Where it's all hidden.
Yeah, so this is very important because as policymakers, we have, our visions and what we like to do, but we can't do it unless there's a budget there and it has to be approved and we're able to put that out. So let's start for a little bit before I get in the nuts and bolts of budgeting. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how did you run over how many billions of dollar budget the county has?
$10.5 billion.
$10.5 billion.
Yeah. So first off, thank you so much for having me today, Supervisor. Anytime I have a chance to talk about budget, which, often I'll get straight faces, and like, oh, we're going to talk about numbers. Hopefully I won't talk about numbers all day with you, but I'm just super excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. So how I started in even county government was just kind of, some people, they plan their careers. Other people kind of fall into it. Definitely the latter for me. So I have been here about 20 years now. And I came right out of grad school. And in grad school, I did not have a, master's of public administration or anything like that. I was a poli-sci major, actually. So with a poli-sci major, I was thinking, hey, I'm going to become a professor. This will be great for me. But I happened to be married at the same time. And being in grad school at the same time as my wife making the money, it was not the best idea for me. So I quickly got out, got my master's, and looked for any job that I could. Public service sounded kind of interesting to me, and I happened to have a contact through, interestingly, the 4th District Supervisor's office at the time. And so I had an interview there. It was passed on to what was known as the County Administrative Office at the time, now County Finance. And that was where I first got my role here. Interestingly, they told me, hey, foot a budget book, which I had no idea what foot meant. It was apparently that's adding up all the numbers. I was like, okay, I'll foot all these numbers. Which was actually not very exciting. So I thought I would be here a few months, and now 20 years later, I'm running the finance office and in charge of it. So really had some great mentors along the way, and learned really how important it is what we're doing for the residents of the county. And as you said, it's the driver of things, which is really there's a lot of purpose behind it.
Yes, there is. And from a policy standpoint, we get together one big budget year,
Yeah.
action a year, but you prep us, which I love the way you've been doing that lately. It's very open and transparent.
Yeah.
We get a lot of weigh in from the community, but you have like 2 months of precursor before that big
Yeah.
budget.
Yep.
And then we do updates once or twice a year too, and make adjustments to that budget
Absolutely.
depending on what's going on. So it's great. So we talked a little bit about your background, but that the big number or the big question I get is where you get your money.
Nice.
And I don't know if I can answer that correctly because it's not just one source.
That's exactly true. As a county, just very basically as the county, we are the administrative arm of the state to do certain things. We are actually not a municipal government, even though an incorporated area, we have a lot of municipal services that we provide. We are really there to provide administrative support for the state. So what that means is we receive a lot of funding from the federal government, from the state government, and actually a smaller share that is really tied to the tax base that we have. Our tax base, which is property taxes that counties receive, as opposed to maybe cities that get a lot of sales tax, we get a lot of property tax. And we are able to use that, as as our discretionary dollars. And that's really only about 15% of our overall budget is those dollars. Most of the rest is a combination of state, federal. We have fees, we have rates, but really a bulk of money coming from the state and federal government.
And I found that interesting when I was in the state legislature as well. like 85, 9, I think it was 92%
Yeah.
is formula funded towards certain things.
Absolutely.
And so when they say, well, just cut your budget, and I get a lot of my residents who are more fiscal conservatives saying, hey, you keep growing so fast. And I'm telling them, it's not us as local government
Yeah.
growing, it's the state and federal government telling us to go do more.
Yes.
Here's a little bit of money. And sometimes that money they give us doesn't cover what they ask us to do either.
That's 100% the case. Especially, yes, on the federal side, that is absolutely the case. Sometimes on the state side, that actually happens as well. Often when there might be state budget woes that are happening for a wide array of reasonings. Um, what the state will do, they'll realign services to the county. And we've had a few times that's happened in 1991 and 2011.
Mm.
There's been a big realignment of services. Sometimes with those services, there's not exactly the revenue source that comes along with it. It will be tied to maybe a sales tax thing, more economic based. And so now we have services that we provide not always matching necessarily the revenues that we're receiving.
So give me some examples of, okay, you said property tax is about 15% of her budget, and then 85 is the other thing. So just name out some of the big categories.
Yeah. So federal and state probably I would say is around 40-ish% of the budget as well. We have a lot of revenue coming from it's we call it um it's fees, but not fees. So, it's not just like the little fees that you charge for entities. We have big services that we provide certain residents. So we have 14 contract cities right now with our sheriff's department that provides law enforcement services on patrol. So we have lots of revenue that's coming in directly for direct services we're providing for cities that are tied to that. So it's things like that we have. And then we have taxes for other things. So it's such an array of things. So it's hard to really get into it. But, our flood control district has property taxes that helps pay for that. Our fire district has property tax and other sources that help pay for that. So it's a combination of specified tax sources that are going for specific things. We have federal and state dollars that are going for specific administrative things that we're doing, as long as services that we're providing. And then even state grants and federal grants we receive. So
Yeah, because we apply
it's
for a lot of those.
yes, and we apply for a lot of those as well. So it's hard to say any one thing that we have, but if you're talking the bulk of what we have, it's federal, state, property taxes that are really create a bulk of the revenue that we're having that are going towards the services that we're providing.
Well, no, expand on the point you brought up, our sheriff contract cities.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my home city of Chino Hills, we're a contract city. So they decide how many deputies they have, and they contract out with the county of San Bernardino Sheriff's Department to provide the police services. Where my other cities like Chino, Ontario, Montclair, and Upland, they have their own PDs.
Yeah.
And they're finding it's harder and harder to keep your own PDs because
Yeah.
it's much more costly to have that one patrol officer out there, when you have your own police department. But, there's advantages and disadvantages to either. But to manage all that and to predict, and I think that's one of the biggest things I always see is on the budget. So take us through the typical budget year. And I want to get some commentary on that too.
Oh, absolutely. So, sometimes people talk about a budget cycle. What I've learned, especially over the last several years, it's not a cycle, it's like year round. We are at any given time, we're either working on the prior year's reporting out of what happened in the prior year. We might be working on, like, as you mentioned, we do adjustments in the middle of a fiscal year, and we might take that to the board, and then we're proactively planning for the future year. So at any given time throughout the fiscal year, we are working on something tied to the budget. But our fiscal year is really from July 1st through June 30th. Um, and we start prepping for the upcoming fiscal year's budget, usually around, where are we, October, September timeframe. And that's where we start working with departments on fees, meaning establishing fees for the upcoming year that we charge out through a wide array of services that we provide. We also begin working on some of our forecasting for the upcoming year. As you know, we like to be proactive in our approach to kind of planning for the future. We like to go out 5 years as sort of a plan on, like, hey, what do we think, just generally speaking, where do we think our resources are coming and how are we doing overall? We're planning like right now for a lot of those things, all in anticipation of leading up to June, which, as you know, is when we look to adopt the budget. Along the way, we're working with our departments to find out some of their needs throughout the fiscal year. And as you also mentioned, and we're working really hard, especially over the last several years, through the leaderships of yourself and the other board members, of trying to be very transparent with the public as far as what we're doing and why we're doing that. It leads all the way up. March through June is really that more public time frame where we're looking to really tell the public what we're doing, seeking input from the board as well, and really beginning to allocate the resources in June.
Well, one of the things you brought up, I want to expand a little bit because that's always the biggest question I have too. What's the difference between a fee and a tax? And the fee is what it costs the government entity to do a service for you.
Exactly.
Versus a tax is what we tax something to collect money to possibly do another service
Yes.
or cover certain things. So a fee would be if we charge trash collection, is what does it cost to send someone with a truck to pick that up once a week, spread out over all the properties, divided by the number of properties, it comes out a fee. So when you work with the departments to make a fee schedule, which we do,
Yeah.
I noticed that we go on every other year
Yes.
to try to see what actual, and sometimes those fees actually go down
Mhm.
and sometimes they go
Go
up,
up as well. Yeah.
depending on what's being utilized. Now, I'm curious to see how AI and stuff comes in to help some of this going
Absolutely.
forward.
Oh, yeah.
And then you walk in like a building fee could be how many hours does that planning officer spend looking at your plans? So again, with technology, maybe that becomes quicker and easier later.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I just want to make that distinction between fees and taxes for everybody
Yep.
because it's a different process to go after it.
Yeah.
But that's one of the big things you lead us up to going through all those departments, and you have to work with those departments.
Absolutely.
And then another thing for the expansion or detraction. So like before COVID, our public health wasn't all that big. Public health has grown quite a bit the last few years, and they've taken on other responsibilities and even our own labs now.
Mhm.
So all that has blown up. And so your department has to adjust for that in real time.
Mhm.
Now we did get federal funds to help support a lot of it, but now
Yeah.
it's larger. Now you got to make sure you stabilize that funding stream for operations going forward.
I think that's just a great point is sometimes when we expand right now, those services are part of our base budget and you kind of honed in on it, in the same way your household budget increases, cost of groceries goes up. What happens in county government is that our costs do tend to go up with inflationary costs sometimes. And one of our primary ways of really funding the county, and we really like to hone in on what are our existing costs. We'd like to look at, hey, what are some of these future costs going to be? And we always want to make sure we have revenue to pay for that. That's just key to what we're doing, is we like to plan out and look at what are all of our possible costs. Do we have the revenue to pay for it? And we try to be real conservative or careful on how we're planning for those resources as they're coming in.
Well, it also helps us to, when we negotiate for our bargaining units or employees, we like those long-term stability. They like the long
Yeah.
stability projects or contracts. So we may go out 3 or 4 years even,
Yep.
and it allows you to, for us to have confidence with your department telling us that we'll have the actual budget to pay for that number
Exactly.
4 years from now. So it's, I really want to say I've been here for a while now that your team is doing a fantastic job, that there really is no surprises
That's the goal.
and it's stable. You're conservative. So if something does happen, we're not like panicking. And when I first came in, we did have those ups and downs in the
Sure.
budget quite a bit because the economy was going ready. But that's great what you're doing right now. So we talked a little bit about the transparency part, and and that's been a big goal for the board to make sure that people can see this very upfront and going out there. So I really want to congratulate you too, but
Yeah.
talk about
Thank
that
you.
process a little bit too.
Absolutely. So, I mean, fundamentally, we know as public servants that we're really stewards of the resources that we're given. We know that, basically people are required to pay their taxes, right? So, anytime someone's required to give you that money, you want to treat their money with a lot of respect. And so fundamentally, we really value the transparency that you're talking about. We want to make sure people know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and want to get input into what they're wanting us to do. And so, as you mentioned it, I mentioned it a little bit. We've worked hard to establish areas within the budget process where we are taking it in front of the public, specifically during board meetings, to really highlight a few things that we're doing. That really starts in March for us as an entity. We have a budget kickoff meeting, and what we do is we'll go into just a little bit about an economic forecast. Hey, what do we see the economy doing, and how does that relate to county finances in particular? That's kind of the kickoff. We do talk a little bit very broadly about like, hey, what are some of the board's priorities? We want to get input from yourself and your colleagues as far as, hey, what are you looking and how are you looking for us to spend county resources into the future? Then what we do is in May, we bring another public meeting in front of everybody. And that's more of a, hey, what is the specific plan that we have for the upcoming year? And so we are putting together what I mentioned, a 5-year forecast. I go through that 5-year forecast and say, hey, here's what we see our revenues doing. Here's what we see our expenses doing. Are there deficits? Are there surpluses? And how much money do we feel comfortable allocating in the upcoming year for different programs and things like that? That often comes with some recommendations or at least highlights to the board about, hey, this is some of the areas we're looking at spending additional dollars going into the future. And that's a nice public meeting that we have where folks can come and talk about what they feel like the budget should look like in the upcoming year. Finally, we do have our budget hearing and adoption in June. And our goal is 3 weeks prior to that to kind of have the budget documents ready for the entire public to
And it's
hear.
quite thick.
It is quite thick. Although we've tried to
Yes.
reduce it actually. When I started, it was actually 800 pages.
Yes.
We've gotten it down to 450, which I was like, still very, very thick.
Mm.
But like we hear that and understand that. What our goal, I mean, and I appreciate you even bringing it up. We want to make the budget somewhat digestible. We want people to be able to really understand. We've tried to move away a little bit when we're preparing our budget book from just a lot of spreadsheets that show a lot of numbers. We like to talk about what we're doing. We love to highlight some of the cool stuff that's going on within the organization because a budget document can be a bunch of things. It is an allocation of resources, but being an allocation of resources, we're talking about the services that we're providing real
It's a
people.
vision of where we're going the next
Exactly.
year.
Exactly. So we're trying, trying.
Well, I remember a couple of special allocations that we had during this process is, I don't know what we called the fund, but we put, when we saw the marijuana fields
Oh, yeah.
blow up,
Community
special
concerns. Yeah,
community
we call
concerns,
yeah.
special enforcement, where we had to give our sheriff's department and others, code enforcement, more time, more resources to push that back, which was very successful.
Yeah.
And then I know in my district, the parks were a big deal. So we were able to put some money into the parks to really start to bring them back up to a high standard of maintenance.
Yep.
And those projects are still going on right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and what we try to do, and maybe we can jump into that a little bit more, is we do use general fund resources. So general fund is that property tax base. The board has complete discretion over those dollars. But we also try to look for restricted sources that maybe do align with some of the things that we're trying to do anyway.
Mhm.
And by doing that, sometimes we can like expand the dollars that we have. So we were fortunate enough to receive what's called American Rescue Plan Act dollars through the federal government. We were actually able to do a lot of positive things for all of our government services associated with some of those influxes of dollars by making sure it aligns with their funding source, but also able to do some really pretty creative and
No,
great things for the
and the
public.
investment into things like that long term, and that's a big one that I want to stress too. Is the county's been very focused on the
Oh, agreed. Yeah.
long term. I see a lot of local governments, local school districts, other districts spend everything you got every year, and then the money's
Totally.
not there, and then all of a sudden you need a new roof
Yep.
or a building.
Yes.
You put away money for infrastructure
Yes.
repair and building refurbishment,
Mhm.
and you have budgets that may be 20 years in savings before you do that.
That's exactly it.
But I love the long-term approach, and it does take the policy for the policymakers to say, go do that. But I see that's my biggest mistake I see on a local level governments and even the state government, to spend everything you have this year
Agreed.
because you're not thinking that long term.
You just honed in on something that I am like the most proud of our county, and not like me. I mean, it really isn't me. This is like you, your counterparts setting that policy for us and then sticking with it is just pretty incredible to me. We have an entire organization that buys into that process. And just to hone in on what you talked about, what we do love to do just from a pure finance perspective is things like a building replacement reserve. So right now we have $40 million that are every year going towards that reserve. What that does is it allows us to fill fund balances, cash balances that can grow for real needs that we have, right? We have a lot of space in the county that a lot of needs for our, not just office spaces, but sheriff stations and things like that, that we have to, want to build and things like that. We have the capacity from a dollar perspective to do that. But what that also does is as we build those, maybe there is a recession at some point. We have the ability now to have built fund balances and also have $40 million that now we aren't necessarily having to cut services in the time of recession because we can maybe go there first if it makes sense without having to cut the services to the public. And those are the types of things financially we're always trying to do. But what's amazing is like, at least for me, is, man, that is with like full support of so many folks, the policymakers especially really helps.
Well, that's great, and I really commend your team for doing that because I've seen it on the local level, even seen it on the state level.
Yeah.
When I was in the legislature, we had a bad budget year. It was just shy of 100 billion, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's only 10, 11 years ago. Now
That's-
they're at 350,
Yep.
but they're struggling at 350. Can you
Yes.
imagine if we actually tripled,
Triple.
300% more in 10 years?
Mhm.
So it's not so much how much money you got coming in, it's but what you're spending and saving and
How you're
preparing for.
Yeah.
And I saw sitting on the state allocation board, so many school districts come in
Mhm.
and the policymakers were spending every dime they have, but putting nothing back in the schools. So they're
Mhm.
coming back to the state, hey, the schools needs repair. We need extra money. Is that we're managing that? So I think that's a great thing. The county's been very stable on that.
Yeah.
And another question is the difference between local governments even and the federal government is we have to be a balanced budget.
Oh,
So what does
yes.
that mean to be a balanced budget?
Absolutely. So technically, and I like to think of everything honestly, there's a lot of zeros, right? It's a $10.5 billion budget, but it's really no different than a household budget. Like people like to overcomplicate things. It's really not that complicated. A balanced budget under the law specifically means you got to have the enough revenues and sources, so cash basically, to pay for the upcoming year's services. So that's the very basic legal requirement. So that's basically like, in a given year of your household budget, as long as you have enough money, period, to pay for whatever your costs are in that given year, you're good to go. The reality, though, is I don't like to look at a balanced budget in that way. I want an ongoing operational surplus, and what that means to me is we have to have ongoing sources available to pay for our ongoing costs. Going back to the household budget, you would never take maybe a birthday check or something and try to pay for your mortgage, right? Well, that's exactly sometimes what happens in local and state
Mm.
governments is they will take some reserves that are like really like that birthday check. It's only there one time, and they'll try to pay for some ongoing costs like staffing costs and things like that. We just don't do that here because that to me is not an operating surplus, and we are always looking to make sure that we have that, in the counties. So
On the economy as we see it grow
yeah.
and you must dig into that a lot.
Uh-huh.
I mean, how much does if a recession happens or a boom happen, we're more property tax based. So I always observe we're a little bit later in the cycle. We get
Yes.
hit not immediately like maybe sales tax on the city would be,
Yeah.
but how's that affect us?
Yeah. So since I've been here, it's been about 20 years. We've had a great recession. We've had fires, floods. We've had some state budget crises. And then top it off, you've had a global pandemic that just literally shut the economy down. So we do get hit economically from time to time. And our approach is one, we are relatively fortunate to have property taxes, and property taxes in general will grow. They're a little less volatile. But in reality, because of some of that realignment that's happened at the state level,
Hmm.
the source that they use for that the money that they use for that is sales tax, actually. So
Hmm.
then we do have a lot of exposure right now to sales tax. It's our approach to always make sure that we're careful with the revenue sources that we are getting that are coming in, right? So you mentioned it, but we actually take some pride in not planning for every single dollar that's coming in on an ongoing basis. So, for example, if I think property taxes may come in potentially at 5% growth, we'll do a little bit less than that. Not because we aren't going to end up spending it longer term, but because we want to just be careful. We want to know that that money's coming in. So we might do something like 3%, as far as planning for the future for programs, we might do that. What that does is we might get more. What that allows us to do is that future year, we can grow a little bit more once we get those dollars to come in. That allows us to like when those dollars maybe aren't coming in as much, we don't have to cut as much. And
Yeah.
so that's something that we're doing. We like to plan in that way. And that's what leads to the stability you're really talking about is we can have maybe not an enormous Great Recession type environment. We don't plan for that. We probably shouldn't because that's like a once every 100-year type thing, but we do plan for even mild recessions. That's how we do it. So we basically take a very proactive approach during good times so that we don't have to react as quickly in bad times.
And look, get you a crystal ball here. How does our indicators look for the county right now in the next 5 years?
Mhm.
From layman's person, we still see growth
Mhm.
coming in,
Yep.
which is going to be positively affect our budget, I would guess.
Yep.
But what do you see? What keeps you up at night too?
Oh yeah, yeah, and there's plenty. There is plenty that keeps me up at night. So, um, where we're at right now is inflation's been pretty darn high over the last several years. We do see that tapering off, but there's been conversations tied to maybe policies that may lead to like what they call stagflation. Right where there's inflation and unemployment that ends up going high, and that could create issues. That certainly is a potential, although, I think at this point, one of the more recent things is like maybe a 20% likelihood in 2026 of a recession, which is not actually that big. Um, the thing that's the biggest thing for me, honestly, right now, just for our county in particular, I mentioned that we do have a lot of federal resources.
Mhm.
There are some recent changes in policy that could potentially impact us as a county.
Yeah.
Especially on our human services side, maybe some of the hospital side. It can impact our county. Um, One thing I love about our county is we love to take everything as an opportunity. So even if it is something that could be, really challenging for us, I'm just always amazed really at the way our employees respond to things that may be difficult. We have innovative approaches to dealing with those things. And we use those as opportunities often as opposed to necessarily like doomsday scenarios.
Yeah.
And so even when it is tough stuff, and we've had, I mean, through your tenure, you've been through quite a bit. I've watched you as the chair during COVID, and it's like I was always just so proud of our organization. Is yes, difficult things do happen, but we often have an approach that's very optimistic as far as like, hey, we want to take care of what not just the employees need, but really what our residents
What our
need.
residents
Yeah,
think. Yeah, it's always driven, and I'm very proud of our organization because as I see politics get involved in policymaking, we're really very pragmatic across the board
absolutely.
between the whole executive staff team like yourself and the board members. It's like, hey, set a vision, let's make it happen,
Yeah.
and that's what we try to do, which is
Yeah.
it's a nice environment to work in.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah.
I see my colleagues in other environments and not so stable
Yeah.
and lots of turf wars and different priorities because of different, I guess, priorities they have. But I'm very proud of our organization and the team they have. If you don't have a stable budget foundation, nothing else can happen with the services.
No.
Our employees feel comfortable, they feel safe, they know that they're secure, they know that their paycheck's coming,
Exactly.
which is this time age
Not
a
always a
premium
given.
right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not always a given.
Yes. And so it's very good because a lot of your leadership on that side too.
Appreciate that.
If we have as a policymakers or our residents come and say, hey, this is a priority for us, how would one go about planning for the future of that?
So, we really do. We look to the board of supervisors. You are the boots on the ground, I would say.
Mhm.
Right? You represent the people. I mean, that's what we look at that as. And so we are really one. I know our CEO Luther Snoke is really trying to make sure his priorities align with the board's priorities. Because we look at the board's priorities as really the public's priorities.
Priorities. Yeah.
That's how we envision it. That's what a democracy does, right? It really, you are the representative of the people, and so we really look to you guys, you and the rest of the board members, as like that. Hey, what is the policy? What are you looking, and how are you looking for us to allocate resources? Along with that, though, we do like to provide the opportunities, kind of what we've talked about, as far as giving the public a chance to kind of say themselves, hey, what's going on? What are they interested in? And so there's been a lot of really important policies that we brought forward as an organization that's really hopefully closely aligned to some of the stuff you're looking to accomplish within your district as well as the rest of the board members' districts.
And it's different sometimes district to district because
Yeah, it's true.
we're the largest
It's different.
geographical county
Yeah.
in the United
Different
States.
regions, very
Yeah.
different regions.
Yeah, we have the mountains, we have the deserts, we have the valley,
Exactly.
unincorporated and incorporated land. So it makes it
Yeah.
challenging, but also never a dull moment. It's always fun, and but balancing those preferences and
Yes.
are always fun for
It
you.
can be a challenge,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, it could be a challenge. And so even though we're, like I said, we're very financially stable, part of the reason for that is we don't necessarily allocate 100% of our dollars, which means dollars truly are limited, right? I mean, they're limited. And so it's quite a process to run through to try to prioritize in any given year. uh, you know, there's way more in need And we usually have to kind of decide, hey, how are we going to allocate that? And so we have quite a process. What we try to do is start with board, start with what are your policies what do you think are important? What we do is we work with departments to say, hey, these are some of the priorities of the board. We want to make sure you departments are kind of aligned with some of those big picture priorities that are of the boards. Departments also come to us with all sorts of needs. There are law changes that create new costs, but not just law changes. There's new programs that are requested. And so what we try to do is go through an entire process of allowing people to have a voice, including our departments. We try to hone it in through it's a pretty big review process where we go have my staff, we have human resources department, we have operational leaders, organizational leaders that look at everything to try to get this this not enough resources to pay for, quite a bit of things. And usually folks are okay with it. So that's a good thing.
If the public wants to take away one thing from watching this episode, what would you say about county finances in general that they should look up or just know about it?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always start from the people standpoint, and so, even though it's a lot of dollars, it's a lot of ins and outs. I guess my takeaway is we do exist for you, the resident, and I know that, we know that, and so it's just would be so great and so important to kind of get to know the budget a little bit. We try to make it accessible. We try to make it, something that can be read. But the more the residents know about what's going into the budget, how we're allocating, the more we can hear back about like how to adjust if we need to. And so really we're trying to make it accessible. It is a lot of dollars, but it's a lot of dollars going towards things that really matter to our residents. And we do a lot of amazing things, whether it's,
And
yeah, go ahead.
it's on our website too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And it's there all the time.
Yep.
So you can see it. Do you
Yep.
have any kind of updates or dashboards, like how we're doing? Like we're on what are we on? Seventh?
Oh, you're getting into all this stuff we're working on.
I'm excited
So,
about that.
so yes, I mean, you mentioned AI, so I try not to just dive into some of that stuff because that is the stuff we're kind of geeking out on right now as far as
Mhm.
the potential of what we might be able to do. So on that side, there's more to come, but absolutely on the website, we have our document. We have a nice little, infographic that really very simply goes over what we have. If anything, look at the first maybe like 50 pages of the budget document. That's probably too much. The first 12 pages, we even have a nice little letter that goes
Yeah,
over
summary.
over like what we're doing and how we're doing it. Become acquainted with it. It's just one, it's just amazing. It's amazing what we are able to accomplish for our residents. It'll give a newfounded appreciation, but also hopefully give a voice to our residents about like, hey, how should we be spending your money?
Exactly. Well, Matthew, you're doing such a fantastic job for us. Thank you for being our anchor there and making sure the rest of the county government works for our residents all the time. And we want to thank you for joining us on this episode of Govern. It's a quick look into finances and on local government or the county government. We have our expert here, Matthew Erickson. Again, thank you for joining us today. And please stay tuned for the next one coming up your way on Govern.
We hope you enjoyed the conversation and found some valuable insights. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, remember that your voice matters in government.